welcome everybody to another episode of Inside the Work. Today we'll be speaking with Chala Hunter on the intimacy coordination of Heated Rivalry. So settle in. I'm just going to get Chala Hunter on the live with me, and I know a lot of people probably have some large opinions about this show and about the intimacy coordination and what this show has done for the world and specifically for the conversation around intimacy coordination in television and in film. So settle in. Let me just grab Chala. Here we go. Fingers crossed that everything works. So if you're just joining, we are going to be talking about intimacy coordination, specifically on Heated Rivalry, but for our actors, we will be talking about what is intimacy coordination, how you as an actor can think about collaborating with this role, and also hopefully hear some great stories about what it was like working on one of the most popular shows in recent history. So just going to make sure our invite got sent. There we go.
Yes.
We did it.
Yay! Technology.
Yes,
I know how to use it.
It's always this strange, frantic moment at the beginning of a live where they don't let you preload the guest, which just seems silly in my opinion. So I have to kind of like talk and like click buttons, and then you have to wait for some. Anyway, we made it. You're here.
We made it. We're here. It's good. So much hosting. You're a professional.
We're doing it. We're inside the work now. Okay, everyone. I am so excited to welcome Chala. I have known Chala for, oh my gosh, like 20 years, I would say, in many, many capacities. So I am thrilled to talk to you today. As a brief intro, feel free to add anything at the end. Chala is a brilliant actor herself, a director, a filmmaker, a film writer, and an acting coach. We have worked together on many, many projects in differing roles, primarily in theater. We were at theater school together. And you have this multifaceted, flourishing career, I would say, ultimately as a storyteller, coming at what that means in all these ways you can tell stories. And so today we're going to talk kind of specifically about intimacy coordination, but for me, I can't help but think of you in all these other roles and how you're bringing all that expertise to your work as an intimacy coordinator. So yeah, anything else, any projects you want to shout out while you're here or anything I missed in your bio?
No, that was amazing. It's like I'm like reflecting on that. I'm like, yeah, good point. I mean, I'm aware of that to a degree, but it's true. I just was speaking to someone today and thinking a little bit about how, yeah, I do definitely see it that way. It's like an aspect of storytelling.
Yeah.
So certainly, hopefully, I'm bringing all that experience to the intimacy work.
She definitely is. She just recently did some intimacy coordination on one of my shows, so I saw Chala in action in this role. Yeah, so we're gonna kind of unpack what intimacy coordination is. Specifically, most of the folks watching today are actors or storytellers. And so, I think I would love to kind of start at the very, very basics because we've heard a lot of different words: intimacy direction, intimacy coordination, all these things. Like, well, what is this job? Like, what is this role? What does an intimacy coordinator do? And let's say how do you intersect with the filming production? I mean, that's a giant question. I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay.
Pick a part of it.
Yeah, I'll get as specific as I can within that. I mean, certainly we could talk about it for a while. I consider my work in intimacy and consider myself primarily an advocate and a facilitator, and both of those terms fall under coordination. But so I always say my primary focus is to be an advocate for the actors, any performers involved in any scripted content in the production that contains intimacy in any form, to ensure that the filming of said content takes place while respecting their consent levels and boundaries at all times. So that's my central priority. And then my second main role, I would say, is as a facilitator. So um, speaking to lots of different people in the production and transferring information between departments and heads of
Mm.
departments, and so that I ultimately am trying to ensure that everyone is on the same page about how the filming of said content is going to go down, and that everyone has the information they need to be able to complete that filming in a way that is efficient, artistic, telling the story, and still respecting the actors' consent levels and boundaries. So there's storytelling in the mix there as well, of course, but those are kind of like my two main lanes, and then storytelling is like all around it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, trying to keep the story in mind at all times. And what that looks like super technically is a much longer answer, but
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah,
No, okay,
that's the short of
broadly,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Advocate. I also see like bridge, like you're bridging
yeah, big time,
between actors and production and also
totally.
between the departments, which we'll get into a little bit more specifically because there's so many people involved
Hmm.
in any kind of production, especially, especially film. I'm wondering if you could give a definition, because I think something that I've been thinking about is a lot of people have a different idea of when we say the word intimacy,
Hmm.
what that could mean. Like some
Hmm.
people might consider something intimate or intimacy, and then people will be like, oh, I don't consider that. So in terms of an actor, if I get a script, what are the things that could be in that script that would be connected to intimacy coordination?
Honestly, it's a pretty big umbrella, or it can be, or like I sometimes say, like a rainbow. Like it can hold many different types of scripted action, many different moments. And that's also like a part of my ethic in terms of intimacy coordination is that I operate from a super subjective, case by case, person by person perspective, because as you said, rightly so, um, what feels intimate, let's say, for one person might not for another, and vice versa. So often when I do a breakdown, I'm flagging perhaps more obvious things that one might consider under the umbrella, let's say, of intimacy, like kisses, any form of nudity or hyperexposure, any form of kissing or touching that, again, this is where it's like that seems intimate or that is intimate.
Yeah,
Again, very debatable landscape, in my opinion, and within the ethic of intimacy coordinating, and certainly any simulated sex.
yeah,
Um, or any type of like makeout or grinding or full body contact. But yeah, also I have done things where I might flag something, for example, like a massage, or I don't know, there's all kinds of other examples. A pool scene,
right.
because again, this type of scripted contact, depending on the lived experience of the performer and also the context of the scene, what's being said, whether their people are around them, what's their character experiencing in the arc of the story that may or may not make that particular scene have higher stakes or feel more vulnerable for a variety of reasons. And then, so that's like the context of the story, but there's also the context of that person. Like, yeah, what is their lived experience? I operate from a trauma informed approach. And so that basically means not assuming, but operating under the possibility that anyone I'm interacting with has experienced trauma in some form, and allowing space for that, and communicating with people in a way that leaves a lot of room for everyone's subjective experience and their personal boundaries and consent levels, which can
Yeah,
vary widely depending on a person's lived experience. So, yeah, like intimacy can be a really, really big umbrella, like a triple
yeah.
sized golf umbrella, a never ending triple sized golf umbrella. That's a good metaphor,
There we go. That's it. That's what, just look for that. Well, I mean, what I hear in what you're saying too is like intimacy is also, if we don't look at it just through the lens of like an assumption about, sexuality or sexual content, we're also getting like intimacy in terms of intimacy of just like the body or
Totally.
intimacy as vulnerability,
Hmm.
right? And, when I think about, you mentioned a pool scene, right? It's very different for me to go to a pool let's say in my bathing suit or
Mhm.
whatever kind of bathing suit my character wears might not be a bathing suit I would ever want to wear. Like there's a
Mhm.
discussion. What's my bathing
Exactly.
suit?
Totally.
Like who's deciding what bathing suit I'm wearing? Maybe it's a critical part of the storytelling, or something uncomfortable happens at the pool, or also in life, I'm not going to a pool with like 200 people on a crew who are there
Exactly.
witnessing a moment that could be sensitive or could be
Hmm.
have really high emotional stakes, or
Hmm.
just be like a first kiss,
Hmm.
like, which
Or even
again,
just be you in a pool scene, and it's
yeah,
like that can be enough. Like it
yeah,
really
yeah, we
depends.
don't need
Yeah.
to. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think it's also about honoring that, we're talking about scenes with potentially high emotional stakes, potentially sexual content, potentially just high vulnerability,
Hmm.
um, and we're stimulating them on film, which is not actually how we experience them in life. So
Hmm.
there's this like added public, it's not only public that we're on set filming, but it's public. It's going to be broadcast to
Hmm.
8 billion people potentially on the
Hmm.
planet. So I think
Hmm.
I love that we're now hearing that intimacy is this large triple size Gulf umbrella term, rather than before. I think it was perceived quite narrow, and
Hmm.
there wasn't much conversation about it. Like it was
Yep.
someone else other than the actor got to decide, what was intimate and what wasn't. And
Hmm.
definitely there was not a ton of conversation around how that impacts with lived experiences and possibly traumatic lived experiences.
Precisely.
Um,
Yeah.
so I before we get further on, like how did you get into this work? What where were you like, I know. This is
Yeah.
curious.
I mean, there's two things that are true. There's many things that are true, but there's two things that are true about that answer. One is that I had, as you know, a theater career that included a lot of intimacy in varying forms,
Yeah.
including sexual content, simulated sexual content, including various forms of nudity and or hyperexposure, and including a ton of very vulnerable moments that in retrospect possibly could have used some support or at least perspective on them. Um, and I think because of that career, I had a colleague and friend ask me when she was making a web series to operate as the intimacy coordinator on that series for a couple moments. And I was like, okay, I can see. And she spoke to me about why she thought I would be a good person to support in that role, which included my experience as a performer, but also I think at that point, I had some production experience, like I had been working in production a bit, but also I think just my demeanor, perhaps, and my ability to speak candidly about things. Um, and so I did that after doing a bunch of research and was immediately like, oh, you could cause a ton. I've said this in many interviews, but you could cause so much unintentional harm in this role if you
Right.
did not have sufficient training, in my
Uh-huh.
opinion. And so
Uh-huh.
I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Is there training out there? There
Right.
is. Can I do it? And I wrote a grant. Big thanks to the Ontario Arts Council and the Chalmers Professional Development Grant. And they supported my training in that role, which then took a bit longer than expected, mostly because I was working in production. I was like working as a showrunner's assistant, working in writing rooms and stuff like that, and as a producer. Um, so that's kind of like the trajectory in terms of how it emerged into my sphere. And when I started looking into it, to be totally honest, I was like, hopefully this will complement my acting career financially. I was just
Right.
like, what could I do to diversify? I'm
Yeah.
mostly performing in the theater and I love it, but
Yeah.
it's not financially sustainable. And so
Yeah.
I was like, perhaps this can be like another arm of my octopus artistic
Yeah.
existence.
My 17 job.
Yeah, my 17 arms. Um, and then I guess over time, as I started to work in the role more and finished my training, I had at that point I was still working in production. I started to see how my experience as a performer and maybe just my personhood and my experience in production kind of converge into this role in a way that feels, I believe, like pretty organic and supportive. Um, and that seemingly so far, knock on wood, is like appreciated by performers and by production. Like my
Yeah.
approach and the experience I bring is being appreciated.
Well, I think, I mean, having seen your trajectory too, like you have truly been in all of those. You've been in the production team.
Hmm.
You are a director. You are a performer. Like you
Hmm.
understand the full film and television system.
Hmm.
So, you're really in the best position to understand what all the different sides are trying to achieve and also
Totally.
the different pressures they're under. So I
Totally.
feel like I feel like it's like a superpower because you're like what the pressure the producers are also
Yes.
under,
Oh my
and at
God.
this
All too well sometimes. Sometimes I'm on set and
yeah,
I'm looking at the producer and I'm like, ooh.
so you're
I know what
also
you're trying to
advocating,
do.
for them, not at the expense, obviously. Like you're not advocating at the expense of anyone. You're actually able to advocate more, I would say, effectively because you know what each department is trying to achieve, and then you probably offer some great solutions in the pinch of things because you can kind of know how to meet people's needs. Anyway, I am a great admirer, so I'm like, of course, this is a superpower for you. Um, so can we talk about how you came on to Heated Rivalry in this role,
Yeah.
and like sort of how did your work start from accepting the position, and then like before casting or throughout casting, like where do you enter the process as the
Hmm.
as the coordinator?
Yes. So, first of all, I received a phone call from Jacob sometime in the early spring, trying to exit winter of what was last year, 2025? Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Woo! Um, time. Anyway, and yeah, he was speaking. I guess he got my name from the costume designer, Hannah Bewley, who I'd worked with on a couple other projects and who I adore. And Jacob and I had previously done two plays together at the Siegel Center where he directed me in like the years of like 2015,
Yeah, yeah. I
2018,
remember. Yeah.
17, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
great years. Um, and we just really got along, honestly. Like from our very first audition, I think like not many people find me funny. For some reason, Jacob does. I don't know why. I still haven't figured it out, but it's still working, so that's amazing. Um, and yeah, we just really had like an amazing artistic and, personal connection and stayed in touch on and off over the years. And yeah, he just gave me a call and he was like, I hear you're doing this now and it would be a joy to work with you. I have this new project. It's pretty explicit. It's quite intense, like emotionally and physically, the content.
Yeah.
There's a lot of high stakes. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like that doesn't rattle me, obviously.
No.
Um,
High stakes. It's kind of like Chala Hunter high
yeah,
stakes.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
that's where I live, just in a high stakes chill out zone. It's really healthy. Um, so yeah, and I just read the scripts and was like laugh, crying, having to look away the whole time because he's an
Hmm.
amazingly talented writer and person.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's just kind of how it happened. And then in terms of when I enter the process, like at that point, I don't remember exactly. I think most of the casting was locked, but honestly, it really varies quite widely. Like sometimes, if I'm lucky, I'm brought on at like well before prep even begins.
Hmm.
So then I am, watching cast get locked and all that kind of thing and having conversations in like a staggered manner with actors. And sometimes it's a request from an actor that comes in really last minute on a project and they haven't thought to hire someone. And then I'm like doing everything, while the production is already in full swing. But I would say
Right.
mostly my experience so far has been, as a credit to the producers that I've mostly worked with, is that I'm brought on quite early. And yeah, I'm a part of prep and having pre production meetings around the intimacy and then speaking to the director and then speaking to the actors and having really like a lot of time, sufficient time as a lead up towards principal production to, get everyone on the same page and get
Hmm.
kind of like a plan in place for how the content is going to be dealt with.
Yeah. I mean, I think as so many people have mentioned, there's like what is it, like it's like a 9 minute sex scene, which
Hmm.
has massive character relationship development
Hmm.
very early on in Heated Rivalry. So can you tell,
Hmm.
we could use that or any other example, but like I'm there watching, not only is it amazing storytelling, but I'm there going like, oh wow, the coordination between the actors, the intimacy, the camera team.
Hmm.
And so can you walk us through like what does a rehearsal look like for, let's say, a scene involving simulated sex
Hmm.
or full nudity or
Hmm.
partial nudity, I guess, because we're not showing full nudity. But yeah, if we go into that section, like where does it start in terms of conversations between director, actor, and then when does camera team come in? Like maybe walk us through a day in the life of we're doing a big scene.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the conversations start well before, because I'll get the director's vision for how the scripted content is going to take place, their rough plan in terms of how they're going to film it, what their ideas are for how much nudity will be seen, any ideas around choreography or just how the action is going to play out, the emotional stakes, just their kind of like vision for the scene. And then I'll have conversations with the actors, relaying some of that information, but also just like asking open ended questions to allow them plenty of space to articulate how they feel about the scene in general, what their boundaries and consent levels are, and then getting really clear and specific on all of that. And if it's, I don't know how many people know this, but if it's a scene that contains simulated sex and or nudity, um, it's now like it's mandated that a rider has to be provided to the actor, and that rider has to be provided to that actor a minimum of 48 hours in advance of the filming of said content. That's under ACTRA. Um, so that, this is part of the reason like more lead time is really helpful and essential because those are legal documents and it can be complex to work on them with the
Hmm.
legal team
Hmm.
or business affairs. Um, But once we get to set, then the set is closed. There's a private blocking and rehearsal, in which, it's still the director's set. Like I'm like a small, very gentle, but hopefully extremely good communicator, like minion, like behind the director,
Right.
letting the actors block the scene, letting the director have the room to sort all that out. Um, and then, jumping in at whatever moment it's most supportive to either set choreography or remind people of choreographic beats we've already established. If we've
Hmm.
had a pre-rehearsal, which sometimes we have, which is
Yeah.
super handy because then it means those actors have that technical choreography or like the series of actions
Right.
in the case of a long scene. If it's like this happens and this happens and then this happens, and that order is really important. If they have a rehearsal beforehand, it always makes a huge difference because then they have that embodied memory.
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, we'll have a private blocking and rehearsal and then go into the filming of the scene. And in the private blocking and rehearsal, like, yeah, sometimes it's about getting really specific, as I said, about the like sequence of events.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's more about setting a container, specific parameters, and some very specific choreography. Certainly, if it's simulated sex, there's always like anchor points and masking that one has to consider.
Right.
Um, but I try to make things as specific as possible through all of my prep and into the filming to get as specific as possible, in order to enable artistic freedom in the filming
Yeah.
of it, so that the
Yeah.
actors have like almost like rungs of a ladder to climb on,
Yeah.
and how they take the step from one rung to the next, as long as it's within both of their boundaries and consent levels, and we're telling the story, then I'm not there to get in the way of that or to micromanage that in any way.
Yeah.
But I try to create really clear rungs of a ladder.
Well, when you say, and breaking it down like that, like it's, yes, it's specific kind of content, but that's no different really than what are the storytelling beats of
Precisely.
even entering a any physical scored scene where it's like, what is the impact of this emotionally and in terms of the story that this action has on this character and that character. So that is just, yeah, pure technique of we have to, certain dominoes have to fall over for this story to make sense. So what are those dominoes, whether we're escalating intimacy or the scene is changing. But I love that, like that this is agreed upon and there is a score or a choreography that we're executing so that we
Hmm.
are all on the same page and we're not being like surprised by
Oh no.
like
Like
that.
Jacob and I said often, like the last thing we want is for someone to feel, this word gets tossed around in such an interesting way. I wonder if you find this in your performance work as well, like and your coaching work. Like I'd love to find a different word for improvise because people
Mm,
often ask me, are they improvising? And I'm like, no, because that means you have no idea what's happening.
right.
You're just
Yeah,
in
yeah,
like
yeah,
open
yeah,
waters, like
yeah,
wondering what comes next. And I would
yeah.
never want to set an actor up for that. Um, at the same time, like I said, choreography could be um, now you enter the room and there's a couple lines and then a passionate kiss. That could
Hmm.
be the choreography, or it could be, and then you open the door slowly and you walk into the room. You grab their hand. There's a moment. Both of you breathe in and out 3 times. Your hands slide up each other's arms. You take each other's faces. You kiss, but barely. And then it turns into like a much longer
Yeah,
5 beat, very passionate kiss with open mouths. Like there's a huge spectrum of how much choreography or
yeah.
direction can be given, of course, to any moment in performance,
I mean,
but certainly to intimacy.
I think of it in terms of some of the training that you and I have both shared in terms of physicality of like setting a choreographic score or
Hmm.
like that's the score of actions, but that then the performers are, I would say, co-authoring
Yes,
how that, I like to say
totally.
co-author, like we're
Yeah, that's
co-authoring this
good.
scene. And inside of that is because like it's there's yeah, it's not improvised, but like the structure is
No.
set, but the execution is organic and
Yeah,
is,
in my training, we speak a lot about
co-authored.
setting parameters or setting a container. And I often will use that language when speaking with
Hmm.
actors. Like, what are the parameters? What are the goalposts? Like, what are
Yeah,
the points on the map that we know we have to arrive at and that we've agreed upon collectively?
yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely think in my work as a coach and as an acting instructor, the vulnerability that playing a character who is like, let's say, owning their desire or feeling desire or engaging in a sexual relationship, like sometimes that is so much more vulnerable and difficult for an actor to be inside of than, like a scene where someone's like, messed up and falling apart and falling out and they'd much rather kind of cry and fall apart than like hit on someone or flirt or be in love, like the
Hmm.
vulnerability. So can you talk to like the like what are some strategies or things that come up because you're also doing, like this incredibly like let's say sexy or intimate, hot, passionate moment, but like also you're on set and like there's a bunch of people there and like it's the least sexy environment. It's the
Yeah.
least private. It's so public. So, you know, do you have any strategies, other than that's the same no matter what kind of content you're playing? But what have you found in terms of supporting actors inside of the contradiction of what the story is asking them and what the environment is actually giving them?
Yeah. I try to name it, first of all, like to acknowledge that the circumstances are A, heightened, and B, like weird, to be honest,
Totally
I'm
weird.
like, this is
Totally weird.
weird. Like, I find it
Yeah.
useful if we can be like, yeah, it is weird. And I always take my lead in terms of how I communicate and what energy I bring to performers from them, because different performers need really different energy, like when they're getting into a
Hmm.
performance zone. So I really take my lead from the performers I'm working with. But I will say I tried to uh, name the heightened stakes and, almost name the challenge without focusing on it. Like,
Yeah.
be honest
Yeah.
about the fact that it is a heightened moment and that it's challenging to uh, be physically, emotionally, and perhaps like bodily, like as in perhaps varying levels of partial nudity, um, that is challenging and that's okay, and that it's okay to feel nervous or okay to think that it's weird or okay to find it funny or okay to need no one to talk to you or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Totally.
like it
Yeah.
actually doesn't matter. It's about uh, respecting their needs and consent levels and boundaries so that they can do their job because they're working.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
and
mean that in that
so
instance, it's not different than all kinds of scenes you wouldn't choose to
exactly, yeah,
perform.
yeah, like
It's
a
like, the
traumatic
conditions are
content
never
or
ideal.
something. Like, does
Yeah.
anyone want to pretend that their, I don't know, partner has been in a car crash or something horrific like that? No,
Yeah.
Um, and I try also to just be, while being like practical and matter of fact and like really grounded, I try to also be as chill and
Yeah.
empathetic as possible. I just bring
Yeah.
my most chill, empathetic, straightforward energy humanly possible, um, so that I'm not an additional source of, you know,
Yeah.
anxiety or an energy frequency that is like invasive or even just taking up too much space.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I'm also there to work. We're telling a story. We actually are working. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to be practical and direct about things as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Were there any really specific challenges that you found or learning moments on Heated Rivalry that like either pushed you in a new direction or kind of like opened up your practice or just were like, oh, this is a puzzle. How do we pull this off together? Or favorite moments that you'd like to share with folks?
I feel like the main thing, I mean, I learned a lot. You know what? I learned a lot from the camera team on Heated Rivalry. I learned a lot about how to be flexible and problem solve and to adapt to what is happening in the moment. I think the
Mm.
camera team, like Jackson, I adore you wherever you are. But I really found the whole camera team, I loved the whole crew, but the camera team on Heated Rivalry, I really learned a lot from what watching how they framed things as the blocking and rehearsal was evolving, how much they were responsive to the embodied impulses of the performers and Jacob in collaboration and myself as well, I guess. But and how much they, yeah, were receptive to the offers being made by the performers, both in the intimacy and in the rest of the content. But
Hmm.
certainly in the intimacy, I think there is a difference between embodied camera work and more like objective or objectifying. A more objectifying approach from a camera
Uh-huh.
perspective. And I certainly felt that, I don't know if they would describe it in this way, but my experience of their work was that it was more subjective and embodied and intuitive and responsive, trying to really be with the performers and those characters. And I think that
Hmm.
transformed um, the intimacy. And yeah, I suppose both as an intimacy coordinator made me consider how it's possible to collaborate with the whole team if it didn't occur on that project, but if I was in a position where I couldn't make a certain piece of scripted action work, that I can talk to the camera team and be like, this
Mm.
is what we're, not that I would go to them, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're a
Yeah.
collaborator as well, of course. And
Yeah.
yeah, just learned a lot about storytelling, I think, from the way that they were meeting the action with their camera work.
Cool.
um And aside from that, I'll just say that I did a lot of research and I already knew some things, but I'm grateful for the research and we'll continue to do more research and, have more conversations and do more looking into like um, all forms of like different gendered sexual experience, but certainly the queer expression, the multifaceted, endless spectrum of queer, non-binary sexual expression, and what some of that is and what those communities are speaking about and experiencing and dealing with. And yeah,
Yeah.
I did have to do a lot of research because,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not a gay man.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
collaborating with Jacob and, as you say,
Yeah.
co-authoring. But yeah, I definitely learned some things, and it's had me reflecting a lot and on the queer experience and reading a lot more literature and content in that space.
Cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I feel grateful.
It's cool. I mean, the show obviously exploded and
A little
became
bit. Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah. I
small
think, yeah,
explosion, pretty
yeah.
much a global phenomena, a huge breakout show and a very meaningful show reaching many types of audiences, which has
Totally.
also been super cool. And there's been a massive, just like massive responses. And definitely, I've seen articles like Heated Rivalry has brought sexy television back, or finally intimacy and relationships through sex. And anyway, lots of hot takes and takes. Is there any, I kind of have two final questions. One is, has there anything very surprising? Like, I definitely watched, suddenly you were being like, everyone wanted to talk to you about Heated Rivalry sex scenes. Like, was that surprising, or were
Yeah.
you surprised by the impact of the show and specifically the spotlight that it brought to intimacy coordination?
Oh yeah, I was like in shock for many months, for sure. I was delighted when the show was like gaining recognition. I really mean it when I say I like truly admire and think so highly of Jacob and his writing and his mind and his personhood and his integrity, as well as Brendan Brady, who's just like an incredible person and producer. Um, Such a gem of a human. But yeah, I was surprised. It felt a little surreal in moments just because we don't experience that very much in Canada. It's
Yeah,
just the truth. We don't. And so I didn't expect the show to do anything like that. I thought it would do well.
yeah,
But I I've never experienced anything like that. And also the internet is wild. Like what can
wild
happen
place.
now with anything is just like, and some of that is beautiful as we're seeing in the heated
Yeah,
rivalry example. And also
yeah,
some of it is not so beautiful as we're
no,
seeing in the heated rivalry example. Like
yeah,
it goes
yeah,
both ways.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, it was quite shocking for a bit. Yeah.
yeah. Well, my last question is specifically geared for our actors. What is some advice that you would give actors as they are approaching, even just how they read and audition for scripts that, indicate there will be intimacy or simulated sex or nudity? What is some advice you would love to have for actors to have going into the profession, being in the profession right now, that can empower them, or what they may not know about what they can ask for, or
Totally.
what would
Hmm.
you love to say to actors?
I would say if you're auditioning for something that has scripted content that contains nudity, intimacy, and or simulated sex, um, when you are in negotiations about securing the part, make sure you ask a good amount of questions about how the director plans or get an idea about what exactly they plan to do. Make sure you're really clear on like that the scripted action is what's going to be requested and that you are uh, interested in doing that scripted action, and I'm not, obviously there's a huge range of possibilities in how that scripted action can occur, but, you know, um, make sure yeah, what the specific action is that is supposed to be taking place if it falls under an umbrella of intimacy, and make sure that you actually want to do that as part of your artistic process.
Hmm.
And the other, the specificity is the main thing.
Hmm.
And the main thing I would say though is just know that you can request an intimacy coordinator on any project. You can request it. You can go to the producers and request one if there isn't one. Um, yeah,
That's
I said,
huge. I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. I said that to a performer recently. So, if you're on the production and you can always ask. Just ask right away. Yeah, and you can request one.
Great. Great. I
Yeah.
also think it's important for actors. I don't know, I feel like I say this over and over and over and over again in my work with actors, but also like taking the time without any pressure of an audition or a thing, but to know how you really feel about proposed content
Yeah,
and
totally.
not being afraid to say like, oh, I need more information. And even if you get
Yeah,
more information, if you're like, I don't think that's for me, like I can't, like you
exactly.
can totally say no
That's what I
to a
mean. Like
part.
you don't have to do a part if you don't want to do that type of content.
Yeah.
That's what I mean about getting really clear about what the action is and, are you actually interested in an artist? Do you feel confident
Yeah.
to participate artistically in that scripted action or that type of
Yeah.
content? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's important. Yeah.
Well, I think framing it that way, do you feel confident about participating artistically, is also the
Hmm.
right question. It's not about like, it's not about you and your, whatever. It's not about making a judgment about you. It's about this is a job, right? So like,
Exactly.
is this
Yeah.
the job you want to
Yeah. Is
bring
this the
your
job for
skills and
you?
talent and time to?
Exactly. Another thing we
Awesome.
say, I'll just say really quickly in intimacy coordinating often is that a no is as positive as a yes because they're both
Hmm.
just pieces of information that allow us to
Hmm.
move forward in truth?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that applies to that as well. Like maybe it is for you, maybe it's not. Doesn't matter. It's great
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh, it's so important. Definitely actors so often feel pressured by all kinds of things, wanting to succeed, wanting to be liked, wanting to get the job, or feeling like they need to book something for their agent, or, there's just
totally.
so many pressures. But I think, it's definitely about giving yourself that space to not have to make a decision out of fear.
Yes, hopefully never. Yeah.
Hopefully never, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I could talk about
Yeah.
every aspect of what we talked about for like another 10 hours at least. But it has been great to have you and to share your expertise on this really important field. And hopefully, actors are feeling more confident about what the role of an intimacy coordinator does, how you can interact, what you are allowed to ask for on set, and also just unpacking um, all the really kind of like technical job parts of
Yeah.
again this very heightened aspect of filmmaking, but also very normal and technical aspect of filmmaking as well.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much,
Cool. My
Kayla.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay,
Okay.
see you
Bye.
all soon. Bye.